How ironic. The problem that got us kicked out of the Garden of Eden, we think is the reason that can get us back into the Garden of Eden, and the devil is the one leading the band. One virus matters: our ego. Our fallacy that we can claim ownership of right and wrong. Clever deceit is still tempting us. That truth is nothing more than a feeling. My job is to assist the truth, to remove the shroud of opinion and reveal our spirit. The battle for our souls is now. My name is Monsignor Cantuzanu. Game on. The book of Genesis, we learn that God created a beautiful world. Everything was perfect, exactly what we needed, exactly what we wanted. But we often forget this, that there was an order to that, and the order was God's commandments. And that's the symbol of the tree and the apple. Because we could look back at that and say, oh, what's the point of eating an apple? What's the big deal there? But it's a point of God created this order. And ego. And who's the teacher of ego? The devil. Encouraging us to listen not to God, but to our own voice and say, you can do this. And so we reach out for the apple, and then that's when chaos enters in. It was the violation of that order that brought that chaos into the world. And we can see that even in our world today. If you think, you mess with the ecosystem, you have problems. Think of those places in the world where a species was introduced that was not natural. All the problems that causes. We know in the natural world, you mess with the order, you got problems, you got chaos. Well, we sometimes forget that that's also the exact same thing that happens in the social order. We mess with that order, we mess with God's commandments, we have chaos. All the things that we see going around in us, and part of us says, well, I don't like that, but we don't know exactly how to get out of that. And that becomes a key question. How do we get back to the Garden of Eden? I think everybody, no matter, even without faith, they want to get back to the Garden of Eden. They want to get back to paradise. But how do we do that? And there's two ways. And the first way is the wrong way, and it's a big mistake. Because some people think that by my ego, by forcing my way back into Eden, I can get there. How ironic. The problem that got us kicked out of the Garden of Eden, we think is the reason that can get us back into the Garden of Eden, and the devil is the one leading the band. Ego, that we can force our way back in the Garden of Eden. And what do we call that? Utopia. Think of all the experiments that have been tried throughout the world. If we just have enough control, if we just have enough rules, if we just have enough laws, we can force our way back into Eden. And the problem is, it's motivated by ego, and it's saying that I can do it without God, without a conversion of heart. It's not going to work. And so, God has a different way to get us back into the Garden of Eden. It's the way of invitation. It's the way of conversion. It's the way of love. And so I encourage us, ego is not the answer. Force is not the answer. And there's another important part to this that we sometimes forget. We look at our world today, and of course, fortunately, we've all rejected bullying. And unfortunately, bullying has gotten even worse because of social media. And there's all kinds of ways that people can be incredibly cruel and harsh to people. Well, it's amazing that we can reject bullying like in schools, as we should, but accept it on a national level and accept bullying. And what is bullying? It's intimidation. And who's the king of bullying? The devil. I still remember when the movie The Exorcist came out. Frightened the daylights out of me. Why? Because that's the tactic of the devil, to intimidate, to frighten, yes, to bully. Think of all of those manifestations of evil. They were frightening. And that's meant to imitate us, to intimidate us. And that's the same thing that evil does today. It tries to intimidate us into accepting a false solution. It bullies us, tries to frighten us. And that's the wrong way. So I invite us to be very, very careful. Because that voice inside of you want to get back to the Garden of Eden. We all want paradise. But how are we going to do it? Don't follow the way of ego. Don't follow the voice of the devil and try to force it. And the other challenge is that that's very tempting because it seems quicker and easier. And I think that's why people follow that path. But the way of God takes maybe a little bit longer, But not only does it work, but it lasts. Sometimes I talk about couples about how to argue. And I say there's two ways to argue. One is debating. Debating gets us nowhere. We go round and around and around and around. And sometimes we do that because we're upset and it's just quicker and easier. But it gets us nowhere. True dialogue takes longer, more patience, and more love. But when we engage in that kind of a conversation, it brings healing and it brings new life. So don't take the quick solution. Don't take the way of ego. Don't try to force your way back into Eden. There's a lot of people that tell us that that's the answer. Be very, very careful. God's way is the way that will bring us back to the Garden of Eden. God bless.